Good morning, everyone. Thomas Montgomery. Today is Friday, July 25th, 2025. We get together most weekday mornings at 8 o'clock Central to talk about the grant, talk about strategies, tips, techniques, share success stories. A big part of what we like to cover in these morning sessions is what are we hearing back from the market? What do we think that needs to be discussed, explained, and or explored. So today's topic, as the screen should be shared here, we're going to talk about the use of funds. Now, before we get to that, let's cover a little bit of foundational elements. So there are two phases to our program: phase one, phase two. Phase one is what you, as a reseller, as a branch office, or just generally a distribution partner, is involved with. Phase one is educating the prospect and then enrolling them in an Express Shelf Corp. Well, why do we do that? Well, from an education perspective, most people don't know what you and I know, and that could either leave them in the dark or, worse yet, leave them with misinformation. And how are they going to accomplish getting funding if they don't know how the system works? So education's a big part. But ultimately, what is the economic trigger for you, regardless if you're a reseller or a branch office, is we're giving away Express Shelf Corps. The grant pays for it. There's just a one-time processing fee. You determine how much that is. You determine how much you make. That's what you do. And so there is an agreement. Let's go ahead and put that. So we'll call it agreement number one. So there's the first agreement. It's between you and your client. We'll be your back office. We do all the fulfillment, but it's your responsibility to get them under contract. So that's frankly not what we're talking about. Phase two is that next step. Now it's optional. So when we say two different phases, you could have clients that just do phase one that don't do phase two, but 99.9% of them continue on to funding. So funding is where we're taking the business owner, the person, taking the shelf corp, which we provide them in about 7 days, and then now preparing it for funding. Let's call this, for simplicity, building the loan package and going to funding. Now, in truth, there's usually two rounds of funding. There's going to be an initial round of funding, which we call the first tranche, and that's right away. So 7 days after you forward us their information, we get them their shelf corp. That's on average, could be 6, could be 8, but on average a week. At that time, we move into the funding process if they wish. At that time, we're going to go ahead and start getting them funding offers for the first tranche. So there is a separate agreement for phase two, which kind of makes sense. Now, the agreement two for phase two is between us and them. You might say, well, that kind of sucks. You're left out. No, we share with you 5% of the client's capital raise. So you're getting paid here, however much you determine, because you're setting the price, and then here based upon 5% of the client's capital raise. None of that's really our discussion today on use of funds, but I needed to kind of build up to our topic just a little bit more. So let's go ahead and go through first tranche funding versus our large business funding. So the first tranche is what we will be able to get for them right away. So again, normally about 7 days after enrollment, we can get them their shelf corp documents. We send them the funding app. And so usually we can get them offers within 24 hours of that point. So that would be cumulatively, about 8 days into the relationship. And then they could receive that funding a few days afterwards. First tranche funding operates differently than the large business funding. I know this is the goal, right? This is where we want to be, but we're often not ready for that yet. We need to go build the loan package, which happens once we're in phase two. People always want to know about timing. If I had to give you a general answer, I would say, so let's go ahead and mark this down so we can all follow it. What's a reasonable time schedule? Now it can vary by client, but let's just go with day zero, client signs your Express Shelf Corp agreement. And they're going to pay you the processing fee. You determine how much that is. So that's day zero. So that's when this time scale starts. So then you're going to forward to us our portion of the processing fee. Usually you'll upload the client agreement into the portal. Some of you like to include it in a mailed package to us. But regardless, we need the agreement and our part of the processing fee. So we'll just call this day one now of when we receive client file payment. So now we're on the clock. So we normally need about 7 days to fulfill that. So let's go ahead and then mark that as the next. So day 7, on average, let's even put a squiggly because things can vary, but normally about 7 days after we receive the packet, then the client receives deliverables from phase one and the funding application for first tranche funding. Now, so we're talking about funding today and use of funds. So this first round of funding, first tranche, it's that initial round here. It is much different than the large business funding. So we want to go into this eyes wide open. So let's talk about attributes. Attributes of first tranche funding. Client will get, we'll put often, not always, but often, many, many offers. There is no hard inquiry to get the offer. So no hard inquiries to get offers. Client can accept one or more. Now, if they get 3 offers from one lender, let's say US Bank gives them 3 offers, they can only accept 1 offer per lender, but they can accept 1 offer from every lender. They could accept 1, they could accept multiple where they have more working capital, but this is going to be the amount is whatever they qualify for. So they don't have to tell us, oh, I want 20,000 for my first tranche. I want 10,000, I want 30,000. It doesn't matter what they want. They're going to get offers, whatever they qualify for. They can accept them or not. So that's different than what we want to talk about today. So that was all just kind of a precursor. So let's draw a line in the sand here. Now we're going to get into our topic today. So when we're on, and I'll extend this out. So when we're on our business funding, again, this is after we have built out the loan package. So what does that mean? Well, so with the Shelf Corp, with the original deliverables, they'll get a business plan and financial projections, and the Shelf Corp will have a name, but they might say, no, I want a different name, so we can change the name. Or they might say, well, because Shelf Corps are set up for specifically 100,000, so let's say they want more than 100,000. Not a problem, but we need to build out the loan package to tell the story of exactly what we're pursuing. Now we're getting to the heart of our discussion. So one element of the loan package is called the uses. I'm going to capitalize it to bring attention to it. Uses of funds. So I want you to think of that simply as the shopping list. Now, we've had a discussion about this before, I know, but I'm getting a lot of questions, comments, concerns. So I want to go ahead and go through this to make sure we're all on the same page. So, unlike the first tranche, where they get whatever offers they want and they can accept it, much, much different on business funding. Here, we're going to have a very specific and written list of what we're going to use the money for. And so think of it, this is a bad analogy, it may be confusing, but let's just go through it. So let's say you and I are going to go to the grocery store. And how much money are we going to need when we check out? Well, it's whatever we put in the cart, right? Whatever we want to buy, it's all added up. And I know there's sales tax, but it's all added up, and that's the cumulative cost. Well, that's normally how we determine the targeted capital raise for the business funding is we work with the client. We don't just dump it on their lap, but we work with them to create a uses of funds. Some of these clients are not as sophisticated as you and I. So they're only thinking about how first tranche works. So they might say something like, well, I want whatever I can get, or I want to get max funding. Well, that's showing a lack of financial literacy. That's not the way business funding works. Because in this case, we're building out a loan package to legally and ethically substantiate the amount of money that we want, which is much different than the smaller amounts of first tranche. So we need to educate them. And frankly, you can even use this as part of your sales process if you want. We had a training a couple of weeks ago where we talked about blank check financing. So let's say that I went to Ernest is on here, Mr. Harris. So let's say I went to Mr. Harris and said, Mr. Harris, if you had a blank check where you could write in any number that you want for money to start or grow a business, how much would it be, Mr. Harris? And then he hopefully would give an answer and say, okay, well, that's your goal. And that's kind of creative, but the truth really is we need to create a list of what we want, because the amount we need is the cumulative amount of everything on the list. I'm telling you, and you may not believe me, but it's true. The majority of these folks, they really don't know what they want money for, or they have some general concept. Well, we're not going to be successful in business funding with general concepts. We want a list. So let's talk about what could be on that list. So within the uses of funds, there are certain categories. So one category would be real estate. So I'm not saying everyone wants real estate. I'm just giving you examples of what could be on there. I'm not saying all of these have to be on there, but they may or may not want money for real estate. If they do want money for real estate, then we need to identify that on the shopping list, on the uses of funds. If they don't want real estate, it's fine. I'm just giving you examples of categories. Make sense? Either they want real estate or they don't. If they do want it, then of course we specify. And then we don't just say, oh, I want some money for real estate. We need to know how much money specifically for real estate. Similarly is equipment financing. Now, equipment financing is broader. That could be anything from a company car to a forklift to laser cutting equipment. It's something that typically has a serial number or a VIN number, something of a substantial price. So we want to identify what real estate do we want, if any, what equipment. We don't want to just say equipment. And in many cases, we'll actually work with a client to get the invoices or the purchase orders for the equipment. The more specific we are for business funding in the loan package, the better off we are. We don't have to have that level of specificity with the first tranche. First tranche is almost no doc. Business funding is going to require a loan package, and that's what our expertise is. We help them build that. What else could there be? Well, maybe they want to do a business acquisition. And we'll leave this general. Maybe it's to buy a franchise, a new franchise, or maybe it is to buy an existing business that's already out there. So that's another category. So it works a little bit different. So here we're going to need to get some information from the seller of that existing business to put into our loan package. It's not a problem. It's just there's some different circumstances. The fourth is what we'll call working capital. And that could be used for lots of different things: marketing, payroll, lots of things. But essentially, it just means they want cash. They want cash. Now, some people are not quite as sophisticated as you and I, and they'll say, well, if real estate or equipment or business acquisition is more complicated, there's more support documents needed, I'll just go in and I'll ask for lots and lots of working capital. Well, working capital within a reasonable amount is not a problem, but when we start asking for an enormous amount of working capital, it can become a little more difficult to substantiate it, as you can imagine. So, what we want to do is just be legal and ethical and accurate and work with the client. And it's our responsibility, not yours, it's our responsibility to work with the client to build the uses of funds. I share today's topic with you so you understand it. And then frankly, some of you are leveraging this as part of your sales process because in many cases, the more specific that you make a the concept, the proposal of getting a shelf corp, often the more tangible it is. People, if they don't understand it, abstract is not very motivational. So I'll give you two examples, and this is probably not a very tasteful one, but we'll just do it. So we could also, for instance, and we'll give some examples of packages, but under equipment, for example, we often get company cars. Now, in most cases, company cars are an optional. It's a nice to have. We all need to drive, and we might as well have a car that's tax deductible. So if you start letting them know, and we could even get things like business credit cards or lines of credit. But my point is, if you are going to get involved with having discussions of uses of funds, not so much to help us operationally, but just to help you close more deals, then you probably want to create more specificity. So if I were to go back and ask Mr. Harris, hey, if you had a blank check, fill in what you want for money to start or grow a business, what would you want? And let's say he says $1 million. Well, if you would continue that discussion to find out what he wants that million for, he'll probably get more interested and excited than if you just left it as $1 million. So back to my example. So I think, in my opinion, every one of us should have a company car because we all need transportation. You're going to have a lot of profit left over, so we might as well spend the money and save the taxes. And so let's pick someone here. Let's say it's who's one of our big hitters. We'll pick on Matthew again. I'm sorry, Michael Matthews, who's our branch office in San Diego. So if I were interviewing Michael and having this discussion, and he says, "Oh yeah, I want a company car," then I would want to be more specific. Oh, tell me about the company car. For us, for example, we bought a Porsche. Some people call it Porsche. I don't know which is correct. 911 Carrera. And so, I mean, you can be specific. We can say, well, I want a 911 Carrera. I want a manual. I want the front axle lift, which costs $2,770. I want those upgraded Spider wheels, which is $2,540. I want those nice seats, which is an upgrade of $2,820. So the point is, if you're trying to work this from a psychological perspective, the more specific you are when you're interfacing with the client, the more tangible it makes it. Now, again, we don't need you to do any of that, but we will be working with each client to build out the uses of funds when we're in phase two. Not from a psychological or sales perspective, but from an operational, from a practical perspective, because we need to know how much money they need and how they plan on spending it. With that being said, some people will come and they really don't know. They really don't know. So what a typical, let's mark it out. What would a typical uses of funds look like? And again, it's up to the client. We're not going to tell them what to do. It's their money. But so normally it would be built around a term loan. Term loans are business loans, not personal. Normally they're 120 month, which of course means 10-year repayment, low interest. So usually the bulk of the funds comes from a term loan. Now, if that term loan's for real estate, it's normally 20 years, not 10 years, by the way. But for working capital, for example, it's normally a term loan for 120 months. So that's normally where we start when we're building a uses of funds, because that allows the money to be paid back over a longer period of time, keeping payments low. From there, we would ask them again, do you want a company car? They may or may not. And we don't sell cars, right? But if they do want a company car, let's build it into the uses of funds. It makes sense. I think I can't imagine many of you don't have a company car. And I know we've got a couple, because like when you get that Porsche 911, you don't want to drive it on bad weather days, right? So now you're going to actually have a different vehicle that you drive on bad weather days. So whatever the client wants, we can get them. And you know as well as I do, the more funding that they want and they get, the more you make, because you're making 5% off of the client's capital raise. So we're not trying to manipulate them. It's a blank check. What do you want, Mr. Harris? Would you like a company car? Would you like 2 company cars? Great. Let's build it in. Let's get you those. That makes Mr. Harris, the client, happy. And it's considerably increasing your cut. We're not all about business credit cards, but in addition to the term loan, I can't imagine any business owner not wanting to have a business credit card. Number one, it adds a trade line, so it looks good on the business credit profile. But there's just expenses, right? You got to pay your cell phone bill. You need to pay your insurance bill on your Porsche. There's just expenses you need to pay. So why wouldn't they want to have, and I guess we'll make this singular or plural, 1 or more company cars, 1 or more business cards. Now, some people are short-sighted. They'll say, oh, this is just about stacking business cards. No, it's about building a loan package for whatever they need. And maybe it does have real estate. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it has equipment. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's acquiring an existing business. Maybe it's not. Maybe it includes working capital. Working capital is going to be the most common. Now, if you look at the Shelf Corp, the way it comes, the way it's pre-built for a $100,000 working capital loan. So if they say, hey, I just want whatever is the quickest, the easiest, then that's probably the answer, because all the documentation is built for that. But if they want different things, we can do different things. In addition, I believe every client could benefit from having a line of credit. I hope every one of you has a line of credit. A line of credit in some ways kind of looks like a business credit card, but it's different. And so you can pull from it when you need. Like we just bought all the new office furniture, which hasn't been delivered yet, for our new office. It's the last thing we need to move into our new building. So I think it was $78,000 of office furniture, supposedly going to come in early August. But the bottom line is the line of credit was great for that. I needed to pay for it. And frankly, my credit card limit, it's not that high. I'm not a baller like some of you, but my line of credit was large enough. So I used the line of credit, get the furniture in, then I'll pay it off next month. So what questions do any of you, and we're not trying to be finicky and talk about all the possible scenarios, but I do want you to understand that the uses of funds is an important part of the loan package. We'll work with them. It's not your responsibility. However, it can be an effective part of your sales process if you want to generate some of that dialogue with them, because when they start to realize that the more things they can get, the more excited they might want to be. All right, Scott brings up a good point about real estate. So some people want real estate from an investment perspective, and then others just are looking for a place to office. And so, most businesses will need an office. Now we provide them a free commercial address with mail forwarding and all that. But the bottom line is, yeah, it's not uncommon for a business to need real estate, and they can either pay someone else's mortgage through a lease or own their own. We recommend getting their own. Also, dependent upon the company cars, I know when we bought the Lamborghini, there's special tires on some cars, and some cars they have to be kept. They're supposed to be kept in a climate controlled garage where the cars don't get too hot and they don't get too cold. If you have those real performance tires, the tires can't get below 32 degrees or they'll fail. So, yeah, it's common that we can show them that real estate makes sense. And if they're going to add real estate to their use of funds, that's increasing the value to them and it's increasing your 5%, your commission exponentially, right? So we're not about upselling people, but it's about getting them what they want through that blank check approach. All right, best way to get support, text us 903-347-8042. You can always schedule a call. 509 Pacific is where you come if you want the funding or you want to become a distribution partner. I've got to run, got a meeting that starts in a couple minutes. If you need anything else, let us know. Best thing to do is text us. But hopefully today you have a little better understanding of the uses of funds. Have a great day. We'll see you back Monday morning. Bye bye.